Hi everyone, I'm Katerina. I'm the Assistant Manager at Pure Pac, and I'm going to be talking you through your Packhouse pre-induction presentation today. So let's get into it. On the agenda today we're going to talk about an overview of how our Packhouse works, some health and safety around that, different tasks and jobs that you might be given in the Packhouse, and emergency procedures. Our Packhouse is located on Felton Road, which is in Bannockburn, so it's about a 7-minute drive out of Cromwell. There's a few different hazards, but the key ones are standing for long periods of time, lifting, carrying, cold temperatures, wet and slippery surfaces, and moving equipment and vehicles that are operating in there. So while I've got this picture up, I might just show you quickly. So when you come down Felton Road, this road here, you'll take this first exit into the Packhouse, the first one, and come around and park in the staff car park right here. This big building is the Packhouse, this one in the middle is the packaging shed, and this one at the front you've got the main offices, which you shouldn't need to go in there, and the lunch sort of area in here. If you do need to see someone in the office, the HR office, where you've got Tessa and Renee, they're in this end of the building right here. I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of how the Packhouse works. So the cherries, they come in this end, they go into an inwards cool store to get cooled down. Then they get tipped or loaded into the machine at this end. This might be some people who might be your job down here to tip them into the machine. Then they're getting processed through the machine, so they're getting graded by size and firmness and any defects. Anything that's the machine detects as not a good cherry, it throws it in the waste bin right here. And everything else gets sorted into categories and sent down one of these lanes. So down these lanes, these are where the graders, as in the people graders, which might be you guys, are in here picking out anything the machine might have missed, any defects. Then at this end, the cherries are going into a box, so they're coming off this conveyor into a box and getting weighed till the box is the right weight, and then passed over here where the packers are rolling down the plastic bags, stickering them up, putting the lid on, boxing them into the outer carton, and then sending them down this conveyor belt into the outwards cool store. So once they get into the outwards cool store, there is a group of people in here that are taking them off the conveyor, stacking them into pallets, checking that they're all labelled correctly, scanning them, and getting them ready to go out the store and get loaded onto the truck. The other things, my cat's walking around in the background. The other thing to know about is this packaging area. So some of you might also be working in here, preparing the packaging and feeding it through to the packers to keep them stocked up with the right type of packaging. You could also end up making boxes and putting liners in boxes and preparing the packaging. You might also end up on the punnet filling station over here. So there's a few different jobs in the Packhouse. We are packing into our own packaging, and we have 3 different grades typically. So you've got down those lanes that we just talked about, you've got what's called export grade, which is the absolute best quality cherries. Then we've got domestic grade, which is still the good quality cherries, but we have a little bit more room for a few defects and a little bit of softness. That's still perfectly good cherries for eating. And then we have what's called gate sale, and those ones are definitely a bit lower quality, and we tend to sell them cheaply through at the gate, quite literally. The sizes that we pack into punnets, 1 kg boxes, 2 kg boxes, and 5 kg boxes. And then we're packing into normally these 3 brands here. So we've got a Gold Reserve brand, our Pure Gold brand, and those are 2 export brands. So those ones are mostly going overseas, a lot into Asia. This is our domestic brand, so that's the one that you might see on our online shop for sale or in the supermarkets. Moving now into some of the health and safety around working in the Packhouse. So one of the key things is standing for long periods of time, and this will depend a little bit on which job or task you get given in the Packhouse. But preventative measures are to have good posture, to stretch before and after work, take short walks during your breaks, move your weight from side to side while you're working, and then squatting and standing up again. That can sort of help to keep you comfortable and make sure you don't sustain any injuries. So in the picture we've got an example of good posture and bad posture. So we're talking shoulders back, hips and ankles aligned, and standing up nice and straight. Don't just in general not being particularly slouchy. Lifting and carrying, so particularly if you are on the Infeed loading in buckets, or if you're in the cool store or the packaging, this will definitely be something that affects you. So lift correctly, plan your lift, go slowly, bend your knees, straight back, hold the load in close to your body, and if it's too heavy, just ask for help. We're absolutely not expecting anyone to lift something that's too heavy for them. So this fella over here with the straight leg bending over kind of technique, you might get away with that the first few times, but you're so much more likely to do yourself an injury. So definitely bend at the knees and then stand out and hold it in close to you. Cherries are packed wet, so they get tipped into water and then there's water running through the machine. And as a result of that, it's really quite common for surfaces to be wet, for the floor to be wet. So don't run in the Packhouse, walk carefully, wear enclosed shoes with a good tread on them. If your shoes are really sort of those sneakers that are completely flat on the bottom, that'll be much more slippery. So something with good tread, and just be very careful when you're walking around. The Packhouse can be quite cool. Even in summer, the ambient temperature in the main part of the Packhouse is about 10 degrees Celsius, give or take. So we do recommend some woolly socks, full-length pants, a jumper, maybe bring an extra layer just as a precaution. The cool store is basically just a big fridge, and in there it's definitely cooler again. It's almost freezing. In the outwards cool store and in the inwards cool store, you will be given a big jacket, pants and gloves if it's your job to work in the cool store. There are a few moving vehicles in and around the Packhouse, so at times there could be forklifts operating in the Packhouse, and outside there's definitely forklifts and there's definitely trucks and other vehicles. So just have your eyes and ears on all the time. And the key thing, particularly with forklifts, but also other vehicles, is not to assume that the driver can see you. So don't walk over to the vehicle unless the driver's turned their vehicle right off and has sort of beckoned to you to come over. Also, only use machinery if you have been authorised and trained by us. So just having a forklift licence isn't enough. You have to have done our standard operating procedures as well. To minimise the risk of vehicles and people interacting, we have these marked pathways. There's my pointer. Yeah, these marked pathways. So this is the entrance to the Packhouse where you'll go into work every day, and we've got these sort of yellow footsteps to indicate where you should go. There's also signage on the doors and in forklift operating areas. So always observe the signs. Never walk into a forklift operating area, and keep to those pedestrian areas. The other piece of machinery in the Packhouse is the grading machine itself, and all the conveyor belts associated with it. So it's quite a significant piece of equipment, and there's quite a few moving parts and a few different motors. It's really key not to touch any of the moving parts. Keep your body clear of any of the motors and things like that. When you arrive at your workstation, you need to just look around and take note of where your nearest emergency stop button is. if something does go seriously wrong, if someone gets caught in something, anything's going majorly wrong, hit that emergency stop button and the whole machine will stop. Hygiene. So this has always been a big deal for us. It's a little bit of a bigger deal now with COVID, but it was always a major because we're handling food and raw food. So you have to be especially cautious. If you're feeling sick or unwell, let your supervisor know, let HR know immediately. Everyone must wash, dry and sanitize their hands before they come into the pack house, and blood or cuts need to be reported immediately. That's obviously for the health and safety of the person who's bleeding, but also for the contamination of the food. No jewellery, no long nails, so they need to be trimmed short because they can damage the fruit and they can puncture through your gloves. No nail polish or nail varnish. Any infectious diseases must be reported to your supervisor. So we're not only talking about COVID, we're also talking about every other disease as well. We are having to go, as I mentioned earlier, a bit above and beyond due to COVID. So face masks must be worn due to the close proximity in the pack house. Everything else we would always wear anyway. So you'd always wear latex gloves, plastic sleeves, aprons, hair nets, and a snood if you've got facial hair. Jobs and tasks. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about the different jobs that you could be given in the pack house. Normally there's a little bit of flexibility to move between different tasks, but I think this year with COVID it's going to be a bit trickier to move people around, so you're probably not going to be able to move to a different job outside the bubble that we've put you in at work, and that's to try to reduce the risk of COVID if it did get into our pack house, moving between teams of people. Jobs. Okay, so packaging. You can see this is that area of the shed where I said the packaging was. This is our packaging machine, and a bit of a conveyor off the end. So these boxes have been prepared in advance and they are getting fed into the packers here, topping them up as they need them. So if you're doing this job, you'll be making boxes using the box maker, you'll be preparing boxes with liners and soaker pads, you'll be restocking the packers as they're using up the packaging, and you'll be also be very careful that you're putting the right packaging in the right place so that something doesn't end up in the wrong box. Another job is loading into the Infeed. So this is what our Infeed looks like. In this picture it's empty, but usually there'd be water in here and there'd be cherries going up this conveyor belt. So what this job involves is the shifting the bins out of the inwards cool store, scanning the appropriate packs as they're getting tipped into the run, loading the buckets of fruit into the water bath, and then restacking the buckets and bins for the forklift to come and take them away. Grading jobs. Okay, so this is one that you're reasonably likely to get because we have quite a few people that will end up on the grading line. So what we're doing here is we're checking that the fruit has been, when it's coming down these lines, we're checking that it's been, sorry my pointer was not down these lines, we're checking that it's been singulated, so we don't have any of stalks that are still connected together, that we're removing any damaged or diseased fruit, any leaves or the clutter that's not a cherry, checking that the fruit meets the grade standards, and if it's not meeting it then we downgrade it to the next grade. So when you're on that grading line, this is the types of things you're looking for. So these ones up here, they're splits, you can see, and you'll be able to tell them sometimes because the colour is a little bit off, or they'll be laying, just the way the cherry's laying on the belt looks a bit funny, so you might have to roll it over to see the split on the other side. This is another example of a different kind of split. It's around the top of the cherry. And there's different allowances for these kind of defects. In the export line, we want next to no defects. On the domestic grade, sometimes a small split that's sort of healed itself might be acceptable. We're looking for funky situations like these 2 cherries with 1 stem. We'll pull that one out. We're looking for rots. They need to come out as well. We're looking for any cherries that don't have a stalk. So all of our cherries have to have a stalk on them. The next thing is it's coming off the conveyor belt and it's going into the packing. So it's coming off this conveyor belt into the box here, and this is actually sitting on a scale. So at this point we're weighing the box to check that the right amount of fruit is going in there, and then we're also doing some minor grading. So if you're standing here waiting for the box to fill and checking on the weight, you're also keeping an eye on what's going in there and picking anything out that's no good. The other part of the packing line is then rolling down the plastic bag liner, sticking the sticker on it and putting the lid on the box, putting it in and out. So when you're on there, so part of doing that is putting the label on the box. So on your station, you'll see these little signs which give an example of the correct way to put the label on. So you can see the placement of the different stickers that need to go on, and you can also see on the printout labels which come out of this machine the information that you need to check. So on the board at the front of the pack house there will be information on what pack run we're currently packing, the variety we're currently packing, and the grower number we're currently packing. So you need to sort of check every now and then that the labels that you're putting on that are coming out of this machine are the same ones that match this board. But you've got this little sort of cheat sheet to refer to. Key thing is not to print these labels in advance. So you see how someone here has printed out a whole bunch of labels. We ask you not to do that because we might change pack run or change variety or change grower, and then these incorrect old labels will end up on the wrong boxes. So just print them as you need them. Don't print big spreads of them in advance. After it's been boxed up and labelled, it goes on a conveyor into the cool store and then stacked onto pallets nice and neatly like this and wrapped up ready for transport. So if you're working in the cool store, part of your job is to check the labels, check that they are correct. And when I say correct, I mean that you haven't got a 1 kilo label on a 5 kilo box, for example. And lifting and stacking the cartons onto the pallets, scanning the cartons onto the pallets, then reconciling that to make sure the right number of cartons is scanned on, and then preparing loadouts and locating and shifting pallets according to the destination and grade. So some pallets we might say they're going on this truck and the other pallets are going on the other truck, so you have to arrange them to make sure they all end up in the right place. So remember, it is cold in here, so we will provide you with that PPE that we talked about earlier. Seasonal workload. So the cherry seasons is not quite consistent. So we don't have sort of a consistent volume of cherries coming through. It varies. So what you're doing in the pack house is totally dependent on what is being picked in the field. So the more that's picked, the more work there will be in the pack house. So in the beginning of the season, our harvest, we're talking sort of mid-December. And I say that loosely, sometimes it can be a little bit earlier, sometimes it can be a little bit late, but this is approximately mid-December start. So through December, we have what we call our early varieties, and a lot of them go to the domestic market. They're especially popular for Christmas and New Year's in New Zealand. And then there's sort of a little bit of a dip. And that's just because while we're changing from those early varieties to the late varieties, we just don't have much in this space. So there's quite often less work across Christmas, New Year. Then we get into early January, and that's when the volume really starts to ramp up. So for the pickers, that means that we take on an extra 1 or 2 gangs of pickers to make sure we can get that crop off the trees. In the pack house, putting more people in the pack house doesn't mean we can process it faster. It really depends on the speed the machine's running at. So we need about the same people in the pack house, but the days will just get longer and you'll have more work. So here you're expecting that you might have a few days off, and the days that you work might not be full days. You might only have a half day. In this part of the season, so we're talking in January, you will have 5 to 7 days a week work, and you could be working 6 to 10 hours a day. Is what you should be prepared for during that peak period. So the key things to take away is that the packhouse work is entirely dependent on the weather and what's been harvested. If they haven't picked any fruit the day before, then you're probably not packing the day following. Days vary in length depending on what's coming into the packhouse. And the fact that it's weather dependent means that you do need to be available across the length of the season, because we can't tell exactly when we're going to be busy. We have an idea from the graph, but we don't know exactly. If you aren't available, then you definitely need to tell HR that you're not going to be available so that we can make arrangements for that. You must sign in and out of every shift, and that's for payroll and for health and safety. A work day. So we've already talked about how the working hours are variable, but it will be typically between 6 AM and 6 PM, Monday to Sunday. In your employment agreement, you'll see, I think it's near the back, there's some information about breaks. Typically the whole packhouse will take a break at the same time because we have to shut the machine down. And there will be additional COVID protocols while you're on break. This will be probably more stringent than what you'd experience out in the community or what you would experience at other businesses. And that is because we are packing fresh fruit and because we are exporting. So I hope that you'll understand and respect the reason that we have to have those protocols in place, and be happy to follow them. So if you're unable to work, you please need to notify HR, and in the handbook there are instructions on how you can do that. There may be some quite long days in the packhouse, and we do everything we can to make those days comfortable for you. You'll either be told at the end of your shift what time the next shift will be, or you'll receive a text that evening with the information about the next work day. The text can only go to New Zealand cell phone numbers, so if you're not receiving it, please get in touch with HR and they can check which phone number they've got on record for you. Emergencies. In the packhouse we have a very normal fire alarm. There's these by all of the emergency exits. If you hear the fire alarm, evacuate calmly through the nearest exit. The assembly point is out by the road. You can see that marked on your handbook. There will be our team members in high-vis. We'll give you directions on where to go. Please don't leave if there is a fire alarm and we've evacuated, because we need to take a roll call of who is there, so that we can account for everyone being safe. In an earthquake, stop, drop, cover, hold, as you always would. Final reminders is that you need to wear closed footwear, keep well clear of the machinery, don't touch anything that you're not trying to touch, follow all instructions given by your supervisor. Morning tea will be 15 minutes, lunch 30 minutes. It's variable times depending on where we are in the pack run. Ensure your machinery or job area and equipment is tidy and doesn't pose a safety risk to anyone. Use the available parking in the staff park area. Toilets are by the staff room. Let us know if you're running out of toilet paper. And please remember, really important, always wash your hands. The hygiene is major. Your HR contact in the packhouse will be Tessa Jackson, so many of you will have already talked to her through the recruitment process. The other HR person is Renee, and if Tessa's not available, Renee should also be able to help you. So thank you and welcome to the team. We're excited to have you on board for this year's harvest, 2021-2022. I hope you've learned something, maybe things to answer your questionnaire with, but also something that's quite interesting. Look forward to meeting you all. Thanks.